All right, so we are still going strong reviewing movies from 2021 in 2022, but it's okay because I really wanted to see this movie. Two things before we get started though. Number one, it's far too early in the morning to be having a beer while I do this review. And it's also far too soon since I did a 8-hour plus live stream. So caffeine, it is. And number two, a very huge shout out to one of my Patreon supporters who allowed me to use their account to watch this movie. It's out digitally now and it'll be available to rent I think February 1st. That was super cool to get that help, and you know who you are, and I really appreciate it. All right, let's talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. And yes, it's marshmallow for the one person that will care. So Ghostbusters Afterlife is the third movie in the Ghostbuster movie series. We can say trilogy, but I mean, it's like, what is it, like 20, 30 years since the second movie? Let's just get this out of the way. The 2016 movie with Melissa McCarthy, that was an attempted reboot of the series, so it doesn't really fall into the canon of these movies. I know that there's a whole bunch of other nonsense online about it not being included in a collection and none of that matters. Lots of people hated that movie. They really give it a lot of grief, and you can take time and you can pick Ghostbusters 2016 apart as much as you want. I enjoyed it for what it was. I had a good time. It didn't feel like a Ghostbusters movie. I feel like they could have put any other logo on those ladies and that would have been just as fine. But I digress. Afterlife is really good. I really enjoyed this movie. It's essentially, if you don't know, it centers around Egon's family. Egon was one of the original Ghostbusters. His daughter and him are basically estranged at the beginning of this movie. She's also got 2 children and she's a single mother. He passes away. That's not a spoiler. The actor Harold Ramis, may he rest in peace, passed away a few years ago. They worked it into the story, which at first bothered me because the movie opens with him like biting the bullet. Again, I don't find that to be a spoiler because it's how a movie starts. Take that for what you will. But I can't really talk about the rest of the movie in any sort of context if we don't discuss that. So that's how the movie opens. And then his daughter and her kids inherit his farm, which is in like, where was it? Oklahoma or something? I don't know exactly. I think it was Oklahoma, but it was filmed here where I live in real life. Basically in Calgary, Alberta, in surrounding towns like Bicycle and Drumheller and Crossfields. So that was super cool to see those locations while the characters were out prancing around fighting ghosts and whatnot. So they inherit the house, and the biggest shout out here is Phoebe. I can't remember the little actress's name. I think it's like, oh, I'm gonna screw it up. Grace McKenna? I think that's right. I'll double check. If it's wrong, they'll just remove me saying it and be like, I don't know her name. But she's really good. We had to look her up, but she was the little girl from the movie Gifted with Chris Evans, which was a phenomenal movie. And she is just as good here. She basically is this movie as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, we've got the kid from Stranger Things playing her brother, and he's doing his angsty teen stuff, trying to impress a girl he's attracted to at the local diner. He gets a job just because he likes her. Then he starts hanging out with her friends, and it's a whole thing. But Phoebe, the little girl, she is like Egon incarnate, right? She's the little nerd that she doesn't wear her emotions on her sleeve. She even says she doesn't express her emotions like everybody else, but inside she's crying at one specific scene or she's terrified, whatever it was. Her performance is spot on, and her performance is worth watching this movie alone. A lot of the time when it comes to like child actors, it can be pretty brutal, but when you find one that's as good as this little girl, diamond in the rough. Without getting into too many spoilers, essentially, they discover that there's ghosts in this area, and that's probably why their grandfather was there. Phoebe ends up meeting Paul Rudd's character, who, if you've seen the trailers, he's a big part of the movie, right? Actually not. I was quite surprised, and I felt like he really underutilized Paul Rudd. For the scenes that he's in, he's great, but he plays Phoebe's high school science teacher, but he's secretly a seismologist or whatever, keeping track of earthquakes that are happening around the town. Gee, I wonder if that's related to ghosts. And their dynamic, like when Paul Rudd and Phoebe, what's his name? Mr. Grukenberg or something? Gary. When him and Phoebe start sort of bonding, it's their dynamic and their chemistry as like, cause he's like this big kid, right? He's a full grown man, but he's kind of like a huge kid. And Phoebe, once they start working together and he realizes how smart she is, I thought the way that their characters were written and the way that they delivered their performances was super entertaining. And Paul Rudd was typical Paul Rudd. He's a sweetheart. And he's awesome. And of course, then you get the story arc where he starts to get the hots for their mom, and that's a whole thing. There's a lot of heart going on in this movie, and I respect the writers and the directors and the producers for doing this. Now, it's pretty much the entire original team. Ivan Reitman was the director of the first two original Ghostbusters movies. This movie is directed by his son, Jason Reitman, who you might know from such movies as like Juno, Up in the Air, and like Labor Day. And he does a really good job at like paying homage to the original Ghostbusters movies, probably a little bit too much. Like if you're a super fan of the original Ghostbusters movies, you will enjoy Afterlife. I don't see anybody being like, oh, that just ruined the original movies for me. Now, that being said, it's just like all of the other sort of, I gotta put my can down here, sequels that we've gotten to huge high profile movies like Star Wars Episode 7 is, it's just a remake of A New Hope, right? Afterlife, at the end of the day, to me, was a retread of the original Ghostbusters. It's just, I'm not, very similar things are happening. Now they tie it in for it to make sense, but to me, so did The Force Awakens. So if you're really bothered by stuff that don't really present a wholly original idea, yeah, you might be put off by Afterlife, but I don't think that should keep you from watching it because it's a really good time. It's not the same as beer, but I feel like it makes me talk a little faster. I don't know if that's a good thing or not. The movie was really cool to see, the little nuances and the details and the mystery surrounding why Egon put himself on this farm and what it is that's going on. Because everybody in the town just called him the dirt farmer, the crazy guy. He didn't interact with any of the town folk here, right? So watching Phoebe and her mom and her brother, Phoebe's brother, not the mom's brother, sort of slowly unravel this mystery from 3 different angles was fun. But in the end, it made me feel like the movie was quite choppy because there was so much going on. We have to focus on the mom. We have to focus on Phoebe. We have to focus on the brother. Who's the brother's name? I don't know. Then we get little podcast, right? This little character podcast in Phoebe's science class. They become really fast friends. He's super cool. He did a great job as well. Once he comes on the scene and once they actually meet up with Phoebe's brother and the girl that Phoebe's brother has the hots for, you can see the parallels that the screenwriters were drawing to the original 4 Ghostbusters. You've got Phoebe, who's basically a stand-in for Egon. You've got Podcast, who's a stand-in for Ray. You've got Phoebe's brother, who's a stand-in for Venkman, Bill Murray's character. And then you've got the girl whose name is Lucky, actually. I really enjoyed that. She's a total stand-in for Winston. And the movie's got really good special effects. They didn't waste any time on any of that. It's quality through and through. And the story about Egon and his granddaughter, it's about a grandfather, and if you know me, that's just gonna pull at the old heartstrings, which it did. And the ending was cool, but again, I feel like it didn't have the grandiose show that I was expecting. Like in the original Ghostbusters, it's in New York and they're fighting the giant Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and then the second one they're walking the Statue of Liberty down the street because of the slime and all that. I haven't seen the movies in a long time. I probably should have watched them before watching Afterlife. The ending to Afterlife, while cool to see everything kind of finally come to the forefront and everything that we've kind of wanted to see, I suppose, for a very long time does happen. But yeah, that ending did leave me feeling a little like, all right. I feel like what happens should have been interwoven amongst the movie a little bit more than just being like, this is just happening for fan service. There was no establishment of what happens at the end. I'm being very vague here, and most people probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it because it's a fun movie. I really did enjoy it. Ghostbusters Afterlife, I give it a solid 8.5 out of 10. Great performance from little Phoebe. Worth it alone, and her dynamic with Paul Rudd, who again does a great job but was underutilized. And I believe he's totally a stand-in for Rick Moranis' character. Like, watch the movie, tell me I'm wrong. That's totally who he is. Now, there are 2 post-credit scenes. I definitely say watch the first one. It's great, and it caught me off guard because just the way they make it work with the credits as they're happening, it kind of makes you sit up, especially if you know the original cast. And then there's one at the end where I don't know. It probably means more to somebody who knows more about Ghostbusters, and it feels like it's setting it up for a 4th one. I really hope they don't. I think Afterlife was the perfect way to show the legacy of the original characters and where it would sort of have ended up. And it does put a nice sort of period on the story and everything because nothing new really is introduced. That being said, if they have to make a 4th one, do it in like 20 years when Phoebe and her brother are all grown up. That could be cool. And Podcast and Lucky, and they can come back and they can be the new Ghostbusters. That might be kind of cool. Anyway, what did you guys think about Ghostbusters Afterlife if you've seen it? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what you thought about the original 2 Ghostbusters movies. And you know what? Let me know about Ghostbusters 2016 as well. All things Ghostbusters. All right, time to go film a van vlog. I'll see you all in the next one.